Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Erin and today I'll be talking about my personal experiences with my superego. Someone asked me to talk about my transitions into my superego and what are the things I learned and what do I know now that I consider to be precious knowledge. For most people, the superego is not a place you want to be. The superego becomes activated when the other sides of your mind can't deal with the circumstances of your reality. When you're in a highly stressful situation, your mind will try to resolve it by using your subconscious mind or your unconscious mind. For me, usually my subconscious will come out first, and then my shadow. Either way, the superego is the last resort because it's like pressing the reset button on your life. It sets everything on fire and burns it to the ground so that new life can grow. The superego will emerge when something traumatic happens to you, and it's usually a chaotic transition as opposed to a controlled transition. The purpose of the superego is to keep you alive, and it's a coping mechanism to protect your psyche from mental suffering. It's capable of triggering a cascade that results in an ego death. So this happens when you don't think you can lose your shit any more than you already have, and then you do. Without revealing too many details of my life, I've had traumatic things happen to me, as many people do. When I was 7, my mom left my dad, and my sisters, who were 10 years older than me, moved out. My dad couldn't afford to pay for our house, and so it was foreclosed, and me and my dad became homeless. I went a long stretch of time without seeing my mom, and when I finally did, I visited her every other Sunday. I didn't have a lot of friends because we were always moving, and in general, I had a very lonely childhood. People talk about the consequences of fatherlessness, but nobody talks about what happens because of motherlessness. The first time I knowingly entered into my superego was a very bad time in my life. Through most of it, I didn't have any real family members that I could lean on or get help from, and so I was on my own. Basically, too many things happened to me, one right after another, in a relatively short period of time, like in rapid succession. I'd always considered myself to be someone who can get back up when I'm knocked down, but this time I didn't have enough time to recover from each tumultuous event. It started happening after my mother died somewhat unexpectedly in August of 2018. My husband abruptly left me. I was taken advantage of by a woman I trusted at work, and then I got fired from my job. My husband and I had decided to separate before my mom died, but while I was at the hospital grieving with my family over the loss of my mom, my husband's father, who's a lawyer, paid for movers to come while I was gone. They packed up the stuff that my husband wanted, and when I returned home, everything was gone, and he also took my daughter with him. I moved into an apartment with a person I thought was my friend, but a few months into our lease, she stole my rent money to buy drugs, and I was evicted from my apartment. Without any support from my family and working as many hours as I was working at the time, I rarely saw my daughter for over a year. This is what ultimately broke me. It was a very dark time. I just want to say that I'm not trying to make anyone look bad, and I'm not trying to demonize anybody. It's all water under the bridge now, but the reason I'm talking about it is because I experienced a profound sense of loss in every way possible. I lost my mom, I lost my family, I lost my job. I lost it all, and this is what I think triggered my superego to emerge. I was a nurse back then, and I got a job at a nursing home. But then I witnessed a patient death that was caused by another nurse's careless mistake in 2019, and it was a pretty brutal thing. And when I reported it to my supervisor, they fired me. All of these things happened, one right after another, with no real break in between. I kept trying to get back up, and then I would get knocked down again. I reached out to someone I thought could help me in January of 2020. This is a person I really admired, and he's a member of the YouTube MBTI community. You can probably guess who it was. But not only did he push me away, he decided to humiliate me in the process for reasons I still don't know. This was the tipping point, the final straw that really sent me off the rails. It felt like being pushed off a cliff. I stopped caring about myself and about my life. I intended to self-destruct one way or another. My mind was totally overwhelmed, and I just wanted to give up. This isn't even everything that happened, but some of what happened is just too painful to talk about. Maybe one day I'll be able to. There were many things that I brought upon myself out of desperation and stupidity. I'd reached a point where I was experiencing so much mental anguish that I was unable to resolve, and then it was just suddenly gone. I'd been suffering from depression, and I had a self-care deficit problem, but then all of my feelings just vanished. I became very reckless. I started making very bad choices. I didn't care about anything, which was fine by me at the time because I was just happy that I had relief. Despite feeling better, dark and delusional thoughts started taking over my mind. This is the real kicker of TI Demon because it lies to you. It tries to convince you that things are true when they are not true. It comes to false conclusions which can alter your beliefs and ultimately lead to destruction. I knew from watching C.S. Joseph's YouTube channel that the superego existed, and I knew what it was and its purpose. I stopped believing in Jungian psychology, but I do recall taking an MBTI test that I had never taken before during this time, just out of curiosity, and my result was ISTP. I had only ever gotten INFP and the occasional INFJ on MBTI tests. So when I got the ISTP result, it didn't even occur to me that I was in my superego. I just shrugged my shoulders and said, it's proof, it's all baloney. This all took place between late 2019 and 2020. By the spring of 2020, I had gotten COVID. I had lost my faith in everything. I was on a bad path, and then came the hallucinations. So I lived by myself at this time. I worked second shift, and I didn't get off work until about 11 p.m. I began having intense insomnia and anxiety at night, and I started driving around at night, listening to music, just trying to ease my anxiety. I remember one night when there were no other cars on the road. I was slowing down to stop at a red light, and to my left I saw a small convoy up ahead. I thought it was a group of motorcyclists from the corner of my eye, but when I got closer to the light, I saw something that looked straight from hell. I saw these walking figures in cloaks, all with hoods over their heads, and they were walking like as a group in the road. But they weren't walking dogs, and they held leashes in their hands. To my horror, they were walking these people who were crawling on all fours. These people wore straps of leather and like BDSM garb, and they had like these spikes on their collars that were around their neck, but otherwise they were naked. They looked like warthogs from hell, and they were moaning either from pleasure or pain, I'm not sure. So my car was completely stopped because I was at a stoplight, and all I could do was just stare at this demonic, procession happening before my eyes. I was gawking at them with my window down, and then one of the people in a hooded cloak who was closest to my car, like maybe 10 feet away, he snapped his head around to look at me, and that's when I saw that he didn't have a face. It was just blackness. I felt utter terror, and without looking at the stoplight, I slammed my foot on the gas and got the F out of there. I now know that this must have been a hallucination, but I had never hallucinated before, and I remember it looking very real. There was nothing cartoonish about it to make me think that I was hallucinating. So I told a coworker about it the next day, and she told me very seriously that what I had seen was a demon. After this happened, I started seeing strange things at night, like shadow people and shapeshifters. I lost another job. I ended up moving back in with my husband in April of 2020 because I had nowhere else to go. In July of 2020, I ended up going to the hospital where they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. Prior to this, I had no idea that I had bipolar disorder. I had never been diagnosed with it. I'd been diagnosed with depression, but not bipolar disorder. And I had seen a lot of psychiatrists and therapists and stuff like that. When I was at the hospital, I met a man who changed my life because it was through him that God revealed himself to me. But that's another story for another day. Suffice to say, like Paul, I was pushed off a horse. Shortly after returning from the hospital in the fall of 2020, I began to experience a mental decline that was on a scale I didn't think was possible. First, I lost the ability to drive. Neurologically, I couldn't get my body to operate properly. It was like my brain and my body stopped being connected. I started experiencing involuntary movements, and at first, I thought it was a side effect of the medication that they had put me on. So they took me off the medication, but my problem only got worse and worse. I had a complete loss of coordination to the point where I had something called akathisia, where I had no control over my bodily movement and I had to be moving at all times. Basically, I was experiencing something like Parkinson's disease. It was constant and it kept getting worse. Eventually, I lost the ability to maintain any kind of focus, so it was impossible for me to watch TV, almost impossible for me to sleep. And then I started having problems to where I couldn't speak because I could no longer form sentences intellectually. My vocabulary became that of a 3 or 4-year-old. I was very much like someone with a low IQ. I lost the ability to think. I lost the ability to have emotions. It kept getting more and more severe, and I believed that it was going to kill me. I was positive that this was going to kill me. And this lasted for about 4 months straight. I can't even describe to you the amount of suffering that went along with this. But then I turned to God and I started to pray. The doctors gave me new medication, and to my astonishment, one day I started to get better. It got better and better, and I could slowly feel myself filling back in. I could feel my brain start to function again. My memory came back, so did my ability to speak in complete sentences, and my feelings also came back. I once again could maintain focus. It was nothing short of an ego death and return. To me, it felt like a miracle, or like God had given me a second chance. But when I returned to normal, I didn't feel like the old me. I felt like I had upgraded to this new level of existence where nothing, absolutely nothing, could harm me. I had lived through something that nobody would be able to fully understand. I had suffered in such a way that when I came back around, I was so much stronger than I had been before. I was fortified. I was made of iron. Iron Maiden. I was able to get another job in late October where I worked for a couple of years. What happened was more than just setting my life on fire. It was the equivalent of lacing it with sticks of dynamite, dropping a nuclear bomb on top, and sowing the dirt with salt. I had returned from the edge of an abyss, a black hole that most people never come back from. I got a second chance at life, and it felt like I had been reborn. This is why I compare my experience to that of the hero's journey, because the hero faces challenges, deals with monsters, experiences some kind of death, but he returns from that death restored and better than he used to be. The knowledge that I obtained from my experience is the golden prize. I learned that I possess a rare strength. I learned that I can endure anything. I learned that God is real and he cares about me. My proverbial skin, which had always been paper thin, had morphed into steel armor. I had gained courage, wisdom, and resilience. I believe that the amount of suffering I endured was something I deserved, and I see it now as a payment of penance. You may doubt the validity of my experiences because I have bipolar disorder, and I fully expect that to happen. If these things had not happened to me, I wouldn't believe it either, especially the stuff about God. I think that God is aware of this, and if he wanted everyone to know that he's real, he would reveal himself to everyone. Everyone knows about the movie The Exorcist, but the movie is based on a book also called The Exorcist. In the book, which is really good by the way, it explores the idea that what we call mental illness can also be truly supernatural intervention, and that these two things aren't opposite of each other, but rather two sides of the same coin, two explanations for the same occurrence. My experience with the superego and really all of Jungian psychology in general has been spiritual in nature. I've experienced a ton of synchronicity. The nature of the demon function, in my opinion, is the most supernatural because it can either be a demon or an angel. In my opinion, and I know I could be wrong, I really think that having bipolar disorder has something to do with the superego. Like maybe it describes someone who, for whatever reason, has more access to their superego and is more prone to the superego taking over than their actual ego than most people. The superego gives you this energy, and people feed off the energy, and we call it mania. Luckily for me, I'm now on the right medication for my bipolar disorder, and it's working great. If you're someone who is struggling with bipolar disorder, I can't stress enough the importance of staying on the medication. It might take some time for them to find the right ones for you, but have faith that they will work. An ego death exists so that you don't actually have to die. I think that the goal of the superego is to be able to integrate your demon function with your daily ego so that you become proficient at it. I know that I come off as a thinker to a lot of people, and while I'm flattered by that, I can assure you that I'm an INFP. By this point in my life, I think I've successfully integrated my demon, at least somewhat, because just in the past few months, I've realized solutions to problems that I couldn't solve before. Now these things seem so obvious, but they weren't obvious for me in the past. I don't want to encourage anyone to try to access their superego because of all the havoc that it can create. But I do want to provide reassurance to other INFPs that if it ever comes down to logic or emotions, go with logic. TI Demon can be angelic. It can save you. Sometimes we create versions of ourselves that don't help us and are toxic, but it's possible for you to overcome your own ego and transcend the limits of your ego investments to become stronger than you ever thought possible. So this is my first real encounter with my superego, but it wouldn't be the last. So thank you for watching this video and listening, and I hope that this can help people gain an understanding of what the implications are for a superego transition. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, go ahead and leave me a comment down below. Once again, thank you for watching.